in Israel. We should look into that. And maybe get diversified into the shekel. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. I don't trust a lot of these banks over here. I noticed they just had some of them have their biggest profits ever. How is it when a lot of the American people are hurting and suffering, the banks just make record money? You ever notice that? Well, of course, war has something to do with it. But isn't this interesting? The shekel surges to a 30-year high against the dollar. And one of the reasons, according to the report, is the shifting regional dynamics. Now, we have been telling you for some time here the last few months that we believe that much of the world's money and attention is going to shift to the Middle East. And here you go. An article from the Jewish News Syndicate reporting that, the shekel is surging as more and more of a dynamic shift moves to that region of the world, which fits right up with the Bible and Revelation 17 and 18. Absolutely fascinating. Wow. All right, guys. Who is it that laid off 16% of their workforce today, Logan? Snapchat. And they said it's because of AI? Isn't that something? Oh, well. All right, guys. Interesting times. A lot tonight. You don't want to miss out tonight. worldviewtube.com, Brandon House Live, and the Worldview Report. Till next time, I'm Brandon House. Take care.
You're watching Worldview Tube, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Do you know whether Joe Kent was leaking?
Look, I'm not a fan of the guy. If you look at, and you never cover this, if you look at his truths or whatever he went on, if it's X or truth, if you look at his truths or his statements, he was all for everything. All of a sudden, he wasn't. He was a man that I met at Dover. He came and his wife was killed. He remarried fairly quickly. His wife was killed, and I felt badly for him. He ran for Congress, he lost. He ran for Congress again, and he lost. I said, he's a guy, nice guy, seemed like a very nice guy. I met him. He was pretty heartbroken, But I said, it's a shame. He ran for Congress twice. Call him up, give him a job in the White House. Smart. They gave him a job in the White House, and this is what he does to me, Being a nice guy doesn't pay off too much.
Mr.
Think
President.
of it. He loses twice in Congress, ran not very good campaigns, should have won, but he loses twice. How do I get him? I have my people call him, because I didn't deal with him for the most part. I saw him a couple of times, but I never dealt with him at all. I had no idea his ideology was left or right, whatever it is. I can say this. He said very strongly that Iran is not a threat. Iran's been a threat for 47 years, and there's not a country in the world that doesn't agree with me on that. So I take this guy, Joe Kent, who lost twice for Congress, pretty badly and tough, and was devastated, and I know that he lost his wife. So instead of letting him live out his life, I brilliantly have my people call him and offer him a job in security, essentially, in the White House. And what does he do? He goes out and he says that Iran is not a threat to get publicity. Now, he probably signed up with CNN or maybe signed up with your division of Newsmax. I don't know.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Good afternoon, my fellow Americans. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday on the Rob Maness Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube and X-Spaces simulcast. And, folks, we are in the middle of a full-blown narrative war. And it's exploding, not just right now, but the last few years, and it's going to continue into the future. And we got to learn how to fight it. Joe Kent's maneuver here is just the latest salvo. The stakes couldn't be higher, though. This is very serious. Look, the mainstream media and the GOP establishment are in full meltdown mode over Joe Kent, and the narrative's spinning out of control at warp speed, except for where it matters, with that man right there. We're cutting through the lies today. We're going to talk about some explosive new clips. You just saw President Trump dropping truth bombs on Joe. You know, the raw moment that Joe spoke about his wife's murder without once mentioning Israel, you're going to see that today. The buried Turkish connection story that the corporate press doesn't talk about. Those of us with military experience have mentioned it and everything, but nobody else touches it. And, of course, that jaw-dropping Tucker Carlson exchange where Joe declares Iran has no nuclear weapons policy? You got to be kidding me. Well, my guest today is independent journalist and Green Beret combat veteran Matt Tardio. As a Green Beret, Matt led multiple killer capture missions in Afghanistan that wiped out ISIS-K. Didn't lose a single American under his command. He later trained SWAT teams across the country on active shooter response. Now hosts the No Holds Barred podcast, Speak the Truth. Google that on YouTube. You'll find it. Sign up, subscribe, all that good stuff. The man is important to listen to. He's been hammering this story from day one, and he's got the receipts that prove exactly what's happening. Loyalty test, election year sabotage, terrorism, and the future of America first are all on the line in this narrative war. Matt, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Thank you for having me back, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, I mean, the president doesn't need me to help him or anybody else. I think that was right after he found out.
I question whether or not he should have access to Twitter or to Truth Social sometimes, but as far as help goes, no, he doesn't need it.
Yeah. Oh, come on. He's entertaining, if nothing else. But he's also a very good. He's a really good messenger for his message. I would say.
Very much.
But and on the Joe Kent thing, you know, he did some standard Trump stuff there, but he outlined some things that really give me pause. And look, I gotta be transparent with my folks. Every time I talk about Joe, I have to remind them that Gator PAC, my PAC, supported him twice for Congress. I've had him on the show multiple times during those years. I supported him in his appointment and confirmation for the U.S. Senate, along with many others and everything. And you know what? He is American that has served and sacrificed for this country, and I always have to honor that myself. But man, I am a person, Matt, that advocates for senior leaders to resign if they can't follow the orders of the commander in chief, and to do it well. You know, I can't argue with him resigning, but everything beyond that, this is nuts, man. It's absolutely
so this
nuts.
is one of the first. This is one of the first things that we were talking about. We were saying, listen, you know, if I resign like that in corporate America, I could pretty much guarantee to never be employed again, right?
Yeah.
Everything that was listed in that resignation letter, everything else, you could simply say, I do not agree with the war. Therefore, I am stepping down because I don't feel that I can properly support the president of the United States at this time. You could put that in there. But when you start listing conspiracies inside of your resignation letter, that's where things start to change. And that's where it turns into a political stunt, not a resignation. And that's where a lot of us are having these issues, you know, like looking over and reading it, things that are completely baseless that are being stated. So, I mean, these are all things that need to be addressed. And unfortunately, you know, there's several members in the community, you know, the soft community that are acting that way, and they will be addressed.
Yeah. You know, one of the big questions that I have been asked, and I'm not a Green Beret, so I can't speak to it, but I'm an EOD troop from way back in my enlisted days, and I would never even imply that I was speaking for the EOD community, even though we're all trained through a very clear training process that exists even today. As long as it's been, it's almost the same. So I understand how they think. I understand what you can expect people to do, how they'll react to certain things, and those kind of things. But never would I imply that I'm speaking for that community. And people are asking me why Kent is able to speak for the Green Beret community, and I just don't buy that.
He doesn't.
Is that
He
true?
absolutely does not. No, he doesn't speak for the Green Beret community. Neither do I. You know who speaks for Green Berets? We like the individuals. I speak for myself. Joe Kent speaks for himself. But there is an overall truth that goes into it, where there's a lot of Green Berets behind the scene that are looking at the things that he's saying and are pointing out the facts that they're baseless. And we're kind of getting over that stuff, because it's not him. That, you know, there's another guy that's running around doing this exact same thing. And like I said, we're going to address this next week, and we're not going to take it. I mean, what the Bible flat out tells us to call these people out by name, does it not? Like
Absolutely.
if they're correct.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
this was one of those
tell
things
folks about the show that you and some of your colleagues from that community are going to do next week. Before we get too far into this, and we'll remind them again at the end of the show. But tell them about that. What's going to happen?
Yeah, so it's gonna be myself. It's gonna be Gary from Paramount Tactical, another Green Beret. It's gonna be another gentleman by the name of Al Garcia, another well-respected Green Beret, particularly in the Middle East, fight. Then we're also gonna have Chuck Holton, who is a former Ranger, and we're all coming together to kind of sit down and go over these. And our main concern, honestly, is between Joe Kent and some of the stuff that they've been spewing that is just factually incorrect, and another guy named Nate that runs a YouTube channel called Valhalla VFT. And it seems like guys like Alex Jones and Candace Owens are getting behind these guys because they're going, oh, well, they're Green Berets, therefore it fits our narrative. But what they're doing is they're ignoring the rest of the community that's out there, saying that these conspiracy theories are out of control, that this is actually what's dividing the country. You need to stop doing this. But they're running this grift train for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you. You know, I've got my own personal opinions, but that's not my job to sit here and slander people. It's just to correct the narrative and put it straight. That's what it's going to be.
Absolutely. And let's go through the letter during this show a bit. Just start from the very beginning, the timing. Now, I have my thoughts on it. I want to give you the opportunity to give your thoughts on the timing of this letter, because he tries to look like he's acting on principle, but because of certain issues, the timing being the first one that hit me, it just falls flat that it's based on principle. What are your thoughts on the timing of this?
Yeah, I do start to question whether or not there was an open investigation that was against him at the time for the leakage. It is possible that there was, that they just weren't able to find, evidence of it. That type of thing happens all of the time. That could have been part of the resignation in order to help, cover some things up in that aspect as well. So yeah, it is kind of odd to me that the White House came out and started stating some of those things about him immediately following the, investigation or his resignation, but I look at that stuff kind of as like a smear campaign. If you're going to have a investigation, likely you've got some sort of reasonable suspicion, to launch the said investigation. I would like to know what that reasonable suspicion is and why they felt that way, because the White House might actually be holding on to some pretty damning evidence that they might need to release, if that's the case.
Yeah, I was concerned about it because, he's especially that investigation part of it, because, I mean, he's the head of the National Counterterrorism Center. And the word that I got when I made some calls towards the general vicinity of the West Wing of the White House, not in it, but somebody that's really close to some folks in there, was on background that it had been 7 months since this guy had classified access removed from the White House's perspective.
Wow.
And if that's the case, and he even mentioned it in his Tucker interview, that he had not seen, that he was involved in the run-up to Midnight Hammer in June of last year, but was not, and was cut out of the process leading up to Epic Fury. And the thing that bothers me about that is the mission, because the mission of the NCTC is to analyze and fuse and disseminate counterterrorism intelligence to the folks inside and outside the country that work for us to prevent those attacks, if at all possible. And if the head of the organization is cut out of that process, then Epic Fury, I mean, we've already seen, 4 or 5 Islamic attacks already. We don't know how many more are out there. So the preparation for preventing that kind of stuff and defending ourselves internally, I think, was kept lacking, considering that, if that's accurate.
So at the time of the 12-Day War, he was acting as, I believe, was chief of staff for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He hadn't been confirmed by Congress yet to be sitting as the director of the NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center. The role over there, now it is concerning that he wasn't involved within the planning of Epic Fury, for that very reason, right? So the
yeah.
NCTC has about 1,000 employees in total, okay, and they are the node, like the central node to where all of the other 18 intelligence, agencies end up having their information flow through. Helps provide a common operational picture for everybody, within the community. And at the same time, the director of the NCTC is actually, like the go-to person for advising the president of the United States on counterterrorism operations. Kind of makes sense, right? With all the intel and everything that's going in. So yes, it's very troubling when we start talking about how, you have Hezbollah, you have Hamas, you have the Houthis in Yemen, you have like cartels down in Mexico, right? All of these people that have been working with the, Iranian, proxy organizations as we're leading up for an attack on Iran. You would think that we would want the information. You would think we'd want the advice of the director of the NCTC right before we attack the largest state sponsor of terror.
Exactly. That was the most concerning part about this whole episode for me, anyway.
Yeah, and it's important to note as well. They don't really have an investigative, arm that goes into it, if that makes sense. Really what they are is a giant filter, right? And so when we start talking about things like Charlie Kirk, for example, it's not like the NCTC touches ground and jumps up and is like, we're here to investigate, right? When it comes to domestic terrorism, the primary, and again, keyword here is terrorism, not homicide investigation, right? But when it comes to domestic terrorism, the primary agency is going to always be the FBI. That is their responsibility, right? That's where it burdens. And they actually send their information up through the NCTC. Now, they can actually request through the NCTC to have information, to have assistance, to dig for more intelligence, to put things out to the other agencies, just to make things a little bit easier. But they're not the direct go-to when it goes down to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. We got to take our first break. When we come back, we'll see a little clip of Joe talking about his wife's death, unfortunately killed in action in Syria. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio.
I lost my wife a month after Trump gave the order for our troops to be withdrawn from Syria because Trump ran on defeating the Islamic Caliphate, ISIS, and that needed to be done. Unfortunately, ISIS was a byproduct of the Iraq war, the invasion, and all the blunders that we made there, but Trump inherited that problem. We had to deal with it. We had to go take out the caliphate. We did that in very short order. Trump gave the order to withdraw, and that's when the DC war machine, which unfortunately is controlled by Republicans and Democrats and even more powerful unelected bureaucrats, turned against Trump to leave our troops there. And she was killed. And a lot of the justification for leaving our troops in Syria and in Iraq has been to prevent so-called Iranian influence, malign Iranian influence, to counter Russia. And that is nothing more than us baiting a trap for ourselves to get our troops killed, to encourage and then really to justify a further war against Iran. It's absolute insanity. And we have to ask ourselves as American citizens, what do we gain from this? If we're going to deploy our troops and we're going to lose our best and our brightest, and we're going to spend trillions of dollars, what do we, the American people, gain? At the same time, we just lost 3 Americans defending the Jordanian-Syrian border. Our border is wide open. Fentanyl is killing over 118,000 of our citizens. 10 million illegal invaders have come into our country. So where are the priorities of our ruling class? And I think it's absolutely evil. I think it's completely and totally treasonous. And we need to get these people out of office as soon as possible.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. My guest is former Green Beret Matt Tardio. Matt, I wanted to show that clip. He's talking about his wife. And the reason why that's relevant is that he talks about his wife's death in this episode, saying that Israel drew us into that war and caused us to be in that war in Syria. And he never said that then. I've interviewed him about that time. As a matter of fact, I have to go back and check my records. It was pretty close to when the 3 troops got killed in Jordan. And I don't disagree with Joe Kent on a lot of the issues he just talked about there. A lot of our troops are in places, they're just targets. They don't need to be there for a national security reason that's important to the United States necessarily in the context of the timing of this hit. But he never mentioned Israel. And I wanted to chat about this because the Israel thing is it's just blowing my mind because, look, America, we don't walk away from our good allies when our allies have been good allies to us, and we have mutual vital national interests that align with each other. We just don't do that, and we should try to help each other if that's the case. But I never saw anything that Israel wanted us to be in the war in Iraq in 2003. As a matter of fact, the prime minister at the time of the run-up to that was opposed to it. And I've not seen anything that points to Israel pulling us into Syria. Now, I'm sure that because of their national interest in southern Lebanon and the northern border and all of those things and issues that are going on, that it was in their interest. But look, man, where is this? It's like smoke coming out of the atmosphere where people are waving a magic wand or rubbing a genie out of a bottle, to even have a better metaphor, to say that all of a sudden Israel is the big boogeyman. I just think that's BS. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, you know what pulled us into Syria? Russia and ISIS. Those are the 2 things that pulled us into Syria. Those 3 military members of the United States Army that you talked about that ended up getting killed in Jordan, it was the tri-border region at the Al-Tamp base. I believe that was in January of 2024. Now, the people that did that was a group called Kataib Hezbollah, however you want to pronounce it. They fall underneath something that's called the PMF, or the Popular Mobilization Forces, over inside of Iraq, which happens to be an Iranian proxy organization. The reasons, and I'm going to get there, the reason, right, that we ended up having to go back into Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with us wanting to get more U.S. troops killed. But in Joe Kent's own statement, where he says, well, you know, what are we doing over there? You know, we want to keep our troops deployed just simply because, you know, we need another excuse to get more American troops killed to go into the region to prevent, you know, Iranian proxy organizations. That's exactly what it is. Right, those proxy organizations ended up getting balled up underneath the Iraqi National Guard, the PMF did, all right, and kind of acted as a de facto National Guard, if you will, for Iraq during the fighting against ISIS, because the United States didn't want to step in. And until Iran said, we are going to be committing our troops to help, you know, get, you know, ISIS out of Iraq, the U.S. didn't want to get back involved. And so that's how that ended up happening. And we've been battling them ever since. And there's still a problem today. They're the ones that are behind the attacks at the U.S. Embassy. They're the ones that are crossing the border, going into Iran, trying to kill more freaking, you know, citizens over there. They're the ones that are giving us problems up in Solmania, up in Erbil, several other locations. Basra, there's been some attacks that have taken place down there recently. So these are all issues that are happening as a result of us ignoring the IRGC and their proxy organizations over inside of Iraq. That's a problem. And then we have to chase ISIS over into Syria to get rid of them. And at the same time that we are chasing ISIS, trying to get rid of them, you need to understand that Russia was the one that was backing al-Assad. So we got Russia backing al-Assad. And we've got the United States that are trying to kill ISIS is going up against al-Assad. We've got all these weird things, you know, that are happening over inside of Syria. It was just a complete cesspool of jihadist, you know, Islamic extremism, right? Jelani, the guy that runs the country right now, you know, HTS, Al-Qaeda, you know, friends with al-Baghdadi, the guy that ended up founding ISIS. Right, he got asked to be one of the founding members of ISIS. He got asked to ball HTS up underneath them, or the al-Nusra Front at the time, up underneath ISIS, and he refused to do so because he wanted it to be Syrian-centric. And personally, I think he wants to establish a new caliph. Like, I think he wants to be the caliph and establish a new caliphate, but that's neither here nor there. Why he's in charge is beyond me. These are all things that the U.S. needs to make sure we maintain influence for in the region. If we don't want a radical Islamic nation like Iran to form again, to have access to nuclear weapons, which, by the way, guess who provided the scientists to allow Iran to have this program for all of the highly enriched uranium? Russia. Hundreds.
Yeah,
Hundreds.
absolutely.
Hundreds.
Absolutely.
Okay, guess who's supplying the weapons to Iran, allegedly? China. Right? U.S. interdicted a vessel in November of last year. November last year, we interdicted a vessel that was going from China into Iran to take weapons off of them. And the reports state that SOCOM troops ended up hitting the vessel, pulling the weapons off of it, and blowing them somewhere out at sea, and then releasing the cargo vessel to go do its thing because part of a container that was shipped out from China making its way over into Iran. So we're tired of all of this crap. And a lot of it, when you look at it, the overarching problem, you've got Russia, you've got China, and you've got Iran that's kind of right there at the center of everything when it goes down to the money laundering, when it goes down to the ways of projecting. The reason that they're threatening to shut down the Red Sea right now, the Houthis, Iranian proxy terror organization, Ansar Allah, that's their formal name, right? But proxy terror organization of Iran, major problem. If Russia gives the command to Iran, hey, shut that sucker down, they shut down the Red Sea, or China gives the command, hey, shut down the Red Sea, that affects the EU, that affects the United States, that affects global shipping as a whole. And so now we're going to have the Strait of Hormuz that's not having anybody sail through it because they're too afraid of getting blown up by an Iranian, unmanned surface vehicle. And then we're going to have the Red Sea shut down. These are all big problems that we've ignored. By ignoring Iran over the last 47 years, we have allowed them to control two of the most key waterways in the entire world. Whether or not you believe in ballistic missiles or anything like that, everybody knows the U.S. dollar is not doing so hot right now. We've got massive inflation. What do you think is going to happen when the oil's not flowing? And then the price of oil goes through the roof. How expensive are things going to get when the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz are both shut down simultaneously? This is an issue that we have to get taken care of, and it has to get taken care of fast.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
I can rant, man. Don't you let me go. I'm gonna go. I won't stop.
What you didn't mention, like none of us mention hardly at all, is the country of Israel pushing us and pulling us around and making us do their bidding. That's what Joe Kent put that in his letter.
Stupidity.
And blamed Syria's his wife's death on Israel. He's never even said that before.
There's zero evidence for that. Zero. As a matter of fact, the New York Times article that came out last week, for those of you that have read it, about a secret war room meeting, that ended up taking place with key members of the Trump admin. Even that article, and it was very clever written in order to try to, spin their propaganda narrative to Israel influence the United States. But if you actually read it, it says that Trump listened to Bibi, he listened to Mossad, he took that information, he gave it to two key members of our intel community that had, military operations, that were familiar with military operations. I'm wondering if Joe wasn't one of them. They came back and they gave Trump their own assessment the following day that said what Bibi told them was basically nonsense as far as an uprising and revolution is concerned, basically overthrowing the Iranian regime. They viewed it as nonsense. But they told him that taking out the Ayatollah and that bombing them into oblivion so that they couldn't project themselves was absolutely achievable. And guess what recommendations POTUS went with? He went with our intel community. So that New York Times article within itself says that he didn't even take, Netanyahu at his word, and he ended up, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just saying, what, here we go. We're going to do our plan. We're going to bomb them. If you want to do it, that's on you. If you want to try a revolution, that's on you afterwards. But we're not going to take part in it. The other thing that drives me nuts too. The U.S. had been building up troops over inside of the Middle East for an eventual attack on Iran for 6-8 weeks at that point by February 28th.
So, about 8 weeks,
6 to 8 weeks or so. Yeah, from my tracking, about 6 to 8 weeks. Early January is where I started to notice some plane movements and stuff over there. So we'll call it 6 weeks to be safe. For 6 weeks, the U.S. was building up forces over inside of the Middle East, and it wasn't until February 11th that meeting got held. So we started moving troops and equipment over there in January. That meeting ends up getting held on February 11th, and then we end up bombing the crap out of them on the 28th. So that means that Trump had already made up his mind in January. The question just was, which direction are we going to take? Which is why now we hear the new narrative being pushed, because all of their other crap has been shot down. That, it's not so much that, they influenced us to attack Iran. They're not the ones that pushed us into attacking Iran. What they did is they shifted the goalpost. They convinced Trump to shift the goalpost to no uranium enrichment, to zero enrichment. Well, I'm sorry. That's why we withdrew from the JCPOA.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally why the State Department withdrew from the JCPOA. This has been at the top at the top of their agenda this entire time. As a matter of fact, only one presidential administration in the last 30 freaking years has been all for allowing Iran to enrich uranium on any part, and that was Obama. What do you put in the dang JCPOA? And then we immediately got rid of it. It's not like it's been a long-standing policy of the United States of America to allow Iran to enrich uranium for this exact reason.
Exactly right. What is going on is somebody's trying to somebody wants the population of the United States divided enough that's going to vote in the midterm elections. And it's not just one entity, I don't believe. I think it's a layered set of entities. I told Gary that last night, that it may or may not even be connected, some of them, but some of them are connected.
Sure, they're connected. Let's look at them. Sure, they're connected. That CIA spy that ended up coming out, who's he connected to? RT, and he's open about it. RT gave him a job because nobody else did after he ended up getting convicted. He's idiots that said that Iran could sink one of our aircraft carriers, and we didn't have a way to protect him.
Who is that? What's his name?
I forget his name. I don't know, but he's never heard of a destroyer with an Aegis system on it. Clearly, right? Then he goes, and so there's that guy. Then we've got Chuck Ritter. Chuck Ritter, also well-known propagandist that works for RT. Right. And all of these different guys that we end up seeing, they all make their way over to RT. And who did I tell you is a big player in all of this? Who did I tell you? Russia. We've got Russia in Syria. We've got Russia inside of Iran. They're the ones backing up the nuclear program. They're the ones backing the enrichment program, giving them all the information. They're the ones that were over inside of Syria backing Assad. They're the ones that have invaded Iran. They've got all of these other fingers in all of this dirty stuff. And by the way, over inside of southern Lebanon, from the guys that I talked to that invaded the ground the first time in southern Lebanon, they were finding complete and total command centers, actual command posts, like little C2 nodes that were built over inside southern Lebanon that have all of the writing up on the wall in Russian. And you can go look this up. You can find the videos from southern Lebanon of the weapons caches from Hezbollah that are nothing but Russian military surplus, brand new. But the interesting thing is, if you look at the way it's stored, if you look at how it's stored, it's in direct line with like Russian doctrine and how they're doing on the front line over inside of Ukraine. It's the same crap. It's the same safety regulations that they're storing in there. And then I can pull up a video from October 7th and show you a guy speaking Russian telling them like to be careful as they breach the wall using an advanced breaching charge.
The Iranians were bringing material and resources into Syria, in Russia, Syria, Assad, Syria, and the Iranians were fusing everything together and resourcing Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. It's so obvious that would be continuing if they can. I'm not sure how active they are today because they've been getting their butts kicked quite a bit. But we got to take another break. When we come back, you mentioned Turkey in the space you did with Kent and Shell the other night. And I want to talk about Turkey, get your thoughts on that, because not many of us are talking about Turkey. And what their goals are, what their role is and has been, and what we're seeing that's not necessarily friendly to the United States of America. We'll be right back with Matt Tardy.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
Question for you on Al-Jawani, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you have time for this one?
Sure.
Because this is something that I know everybody on the panel is pretty pissed off about.
Near and dear to my heart, yeah.
Why?
Well, man, I wish I could tell you the exact reason why. This was something we debated pretty heavily. I think the Turks did a good job, and the Gulf Arabs did a good job of convincing the president that, hey, this was going to be a great idea. Just sort of let this happen. Let's acknowledge Jelani. And so now we're in bed with, the guy who was hand selected by Zawahiri in Al Qaeda, and his coalition is made up of guys that are even more hardcore than him.
You've talked a lot about the Israeli influence on the United States government. I haven't heard you mention the Turks, who I hate, by the way. I have my own hate against the Turks. But how come I haven't heard you talk about this before? Because it seems the Turks' influence on the president, putting a terrorist in charge of another country, seems to be a much greater national security concern with what that man is capable of.
Well, the Turks just don't have the influence the Israelis do. So I would say in general, like what we've been doing in the Middle East is by and large benefited the Israelis, heavy Israeli lobby. That's been my issue, especially with Iran.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and Matt Tardio, that man right there, is my guest today. And we're talking about Kent, and more importantly, though, his maneuver to add himself to this information war that's being conducted on the American people and our close allies, especially our close ally Israel. Matt, I'm glad you brought Turkey up because with everybody going off the rails on this Israel conspiracy thing, nobody talks about him. The man has just in the last 3 days threatened Israel if they continue to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon. The man has stated that he wants to reestablish the caliphate of the Ottoman Empire in some form or another. So we know that's a strategic goal. And the man has threatened to enter the war if we continue the war on Iran. So it's very important that people know that the Turks really were instrumental in getting al-Jilani in place. I mean, maybe he's the vice caliph for Erdogan when Erdogan reestablishes his caliphate. I don't know, but I don't think any of that is good for the West, especially the United States.
No, and I'll be clear. I don't think Islam's good for the West, period. I don't think any Islam's good for the West. And that's just my own personal belief, based off of everything that I've seen. However, right, having al-Jilani in charge of Syria, not very good at all. Right. We can talk about the chemical weapons plants that they had over there. We can talk about all of these things. But the big issue that I have is this narrative that's being pushed about the amount of influence and control that Israel has on the United States of America. I'm America first. I'm God before my country. Right. Like I'm truth. Yeah. I will always side with the truth. And so when I'm seeing this happen and I'm seeing people that are going off on Israel saying, look out for the foreign influence of Israel on our own government. And even when I see news articles from the New York Times that are being written about it that say, Trump listened to Bibi, and then he ended up passing information off to our intel community, took the recommendation from our intel community and moved on. Okay, well, I highly doubt that our intel community said that putting al-Jilani, a man who last year had a $10 million, year before last now, because we're in 2026, had a $10 million bounty on his head for being a freaking terrorist, responsible for the death of Americans, that we're going to put him in charge of Syria. I highly doubt our intel community said that's a good idea. And so you want to talk about foreign influence. Let's talk about Turkey. Let's talk about our largest NATO ally and the blind eye that we have turned to their blatant support for ISIS. You want to hear something wild, sir? You want to hear something wild? When I was in Afghanistan in 2016, I believe I was there 2016, 17, 18. When I was there in 2016 in Kabul, there was a Turkish convoy that was driving outside of H-Kaya up in the ridgeline that kind of goes outside of there. And one of their vehicles ended up getting blown up and somebody got killed. You know what ISIS did? ISIS issued a formal apology to Turkey for killing their Muslim brothers.
Wow.
They're sorry. They thought it was us. They thought it was Big Satan that they were going after. So they issued them a formal apology for killing their Muslim brothers.
And the Turks were there as part of the NATO operation, right? As a NATO ally. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, Turkey is the largest NATO force, second to us. And they were also the largest supplier of NATO troops in Afghanistan. So when we start looking at this and we start talking about that foreign influence, my one buddy that's going to be on the show next week, I believe we're doing it Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. My one buddy that's going to be on that show, he says from all of the time that he operated over inside of Syria and Iraq, he said any of the reporters knew that were coming in. If they wanted to actually talk to ISIS, they knew not to go to Syria. They know not to go to Iraq. They knew to go to Turkey. Because that's where they're going to be at. That's where they're friendly. That's where they're coming from. And it was actually rumored that when, the Assad regime had fallen, and we watched it happen, as a matter of fact, If you go back and you kind of look at how the battle map developed, when the Assad regime had fallen, when Russia flew out al-Assad and Turkey started to come in, Turkey didn't just push south towards Damascus. It didn't just flow south out of Turkey. They also turned and they went east along their border and started running on the border. You know why? Because that's where a lot of the ISIS camps were at.
Right.
It was rumored that they were going to go in there and they were going to liberate those ISIS camps and release them. So these are very, very real issues. And you're right. They have threatened Israel over this last year, over Lebanon. They've also, back in 2023, going into 2024, had threatened Israel over Gaza as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
And we're turning a blind eye to this. We're pretending like it's not a problem. My want is, why are we listening to Turkey? What influence does Turkey have? And as long as all of this information is getting blasted out there, and I'll remind you too, it was Turkey that got given the S-400 systems by Russia and then tried to acquire F-35s from the United States of America under Joe Biden.
Exactly.
And thank God that got canceled, right? So Russia gives Turkey S-400s, which, for those of you guys that don't know, that's their aerial defense asset that's going to be able to pick up. I mean, you could probably explain this better to me, but the way I understand it is that those S-400s all talk to each other, pull that radar signature off the F-35, and feed that information back to Russia. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Our premier stealth fighter?
All their systems do that. Absolutely.
So why? Why is Turkey doing this? They know that. Biden's stupid. I don't put anything past Biden to approve that sale of the Democrats, but Turkey knows what they're doing. Russia knows what they're doing. Why are we allowing Turkey to do all this? And why haven't we talked about that? Why isn't it a major concern for Joe Kent? Why isn't it a major concern for any of these people out there that are screaming about Israel, that Turkey, working with Russia to acquire technology of the United States of America, that is supporting foreign terror organizations, that supported and pushed the United States to put in a terrorist that has killed Americans in charge of another country and allowed Trump to have, like, influence Trump to the point to make it happen? Why is that not a major concern? Killing terrorists inside of Iran, who cares? Convincing the president of the United States to put a terrorist in charge?
Not only a terrorist, I mean the terrorist that killed Americans and has a bounty on his hands because of it.
10 million.
You know, it's amazing. Let me ask you about Turkey a little bit more. If a free Persia rises back up, what does that do to the region from the perspective of peer power against each other and peer competition between a free Persia and Turks?
You know what's interesting that you bring this up? There was 2 ballistic missiles that got fired at Turkey. It may have been 3, I can't remember. But since this whole thing started, is it 3 now? 3 ballistic missiles that got fired at Turkey and Iran. Should you notice how they haven't said anything about that? I've also noticed that there is rumors of defectors within the IRGC, and we're seeing videos of them, shooting each other. We're seeing videos of different ambushes, drive-by shootings. I'm seeing videos of not one-way suicide attack drones. And this is in a direct answer to your question. I'm seeing videos of not one-way suicide attack drones, but like quadcopters that are dropping grenades and stuff on people on IRGC and besieged checkpoints that are happening over there. So it's easy to say that there is definitely defectors. We've seen that. As a matter of fact, the IRGC actually came out and stated that they had, I think it was like over 13,000 people that were talking about defecting beforehand. And I could reference the video and show that later. But the point being, do we know if it was defectors that ended up firing those 3 ballistic missiles at Turkey? Right? Because Turkey certainly, Turkey certainly didn't, seem to want to take retaliation against the IRGC because of it. I mean, that would be my guess. And so I think like a free Persia, if you will, or a free Iran is going to end up kind of ruining this new look, because you've got a bunch of people that are against radical Islam that are in charge of very key terrain. Both of them are, right? That is going to be a direct opposition to everything that Turkey is supporting over in the Middle East. Think about it. I think it would be a huge opposition. I think Turkey doesn't want that to happen. They're supporting, they're supporting terror organizations. They're clearly pushing, and I brought this up on a different interview. Hezbollah over inside of Lebanon has vast influence, Hezbollah has members within the Lebanese parliament. We have tried UN Resolution 1701. They're not supposed to be south of Litani. We have tried the ceasefire agreement in November of 24. where again, it was basically just an agreement to move Hezbollah back north of the Litani River between, the UN and between the Lebanese military. That's what they were supposed to do. They failed to do it.
Yeah, I think that's what
Hezbollah
Israel's
bricked
doing
themselves
right
in
now.
harder.
I think
That's
Israel's
exactly what
taking
they're
care of
doing.
that.
That's exactly what they're doing. Now, look who backed up the Pakistani prime minister. The Pakistani prime minister's statement that said that Lebanon was included as part of the ceasefire agreement was after POTUS put his out, stating that it was a ceasefire on Iran. It was after the Iranian foreign minister put his out that pretty much mirrored POTUS's. It was over an hour later he comes up with this ridiculous statement saying that Lebanon was included. The attack against Hezbollah. Guess what nation backed that statement? Guess what nation was pushing to have that jihadist, And by the way, the Pakistani prime minister, not a friend of ours. Not
Absolutely
a friend.
not.
He flat out stands with the IRGC. He stated it. He issued apologies and condolences when the Ayatollah got killed. He's not a friend of ours. He's got a nuke. He actually houses more foreign terror organizations than any other country on this planet.
Oh yeah, Quds forces have been going back and forth across that border for decades, man, and coordinating and living in different parts of the country and all that. There's no doubt about it. So Turkey was behind that statement? Did I understand you correctly?
Turkey's backing the statement. No, Turkey's backing the statement. Turkey's pushing for the ceasefire over inside of Lebanon based on the Pakistani prime minister's lies.
Yeah, exactly.
Very blatant, very clear bias, very clear, and Turkey's backing it. Why? Turkey has been behind backing all of these people, acting as if they're our ally, they're a legitimate force, and you know what they're actually doing is they're sabotaging us behind the scenes, trying to steal our technology, working hand in hand with the Russians, backing up countries like Pakistan and Iran. You had 3 ballistic missiles fired at your country, and you're not going after them?
That's right. As a NATO ally.
They're going after the Kurds. They're going after the Kurds, by the way.
Absolutely, they're going after the Kurds because they hate the Kurds. All right, we got to take our last break, Matt. When we come back, we'll see a clip about Joe Kent denying that Iran has a nuclear weapons development policy. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio. If you're not in here listening to this, you need to be.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com.
Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either. I mean, the Iranians have had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against actually developing a nuclear weapon since 2004. That's been in place since 2004. That's available in the public sphere. But then also we had no intelligence to indicate that fatwa was being disobeyed or it was on the cusp of being lifted. The Iranian strategy, it's actually pretty pragmatic. The Iranians are obviously aware of what's taking place in their region, and their strategy was to not completely abandon their nuclear program because they saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya when he said, hey, I've got no more nukes. I'll do what you say. I'll give up my nukes.
And we gave him the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, we regime changed him, and he was executed by his own people in the most horrific way.
Oh, sodomized by a bayonet. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's that's the lesson I think that the entire region took from that when Hillary Clinton.
Unfortunately, that is what the neocon, neoliberal warmongers. That's the lesson that they showed everyone in the region. And then conversely, the Iranians also knew that if they came out and said, "Okay, we've got a nuke," whether they were bluffing or not, Saddam Hussein, Iraq right next door. So they kind of had this.
Hung, I think.
He was hung by his own people, after a bloody, war that's still essentially going on inside of Iraq. So the Iranians' position, when viewed from the lens of the region, was actually fairly pragmatic. They were preventing, themselves from developing a bomb, but they still wanted the ability. They wanted the ability to enrich. They wanted the ability to have some components so that they weren't completely stripped of it. And when we always assessed that they were either several months or a year, 2 years away from actually being able to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's not because the Iranians are stupid people. I think we can tell right now that the Iranians are anything but stupid. They had the ability, I think, that the brain power to actually develop one, or they could have simply traded a ton of oil with Pakistan or with someone else to actually get a nuclear weapon. They were not doing that. We had no intelligence to indicate that they were.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about that man right there, his resignation, the timing of it, what he put in the letter, the conspiracy theories. And this is probably the biggest one, and my guess is Matt Tardio, former Green Beret. And Matt, this is probably the biggest problem I have with his information warfare effort, and that is that to paint these fanatics that believe in 12th Imam idea, it's even in their constitution, as pragmatic. Yeah, we're really, come on, man. We've all been around. I've been around Muslim societies and living in them since I was 9 years old and fighting them. These guys, anyway, since I was 17 when I first came into uniform in '79. So, come on, pragmatic. Give me a break.
Not pragmatic at all. And in addition to that, lying, and using a fatwa from 2004, which I don't know if you know this or not, right? But only if you follow that particular cleric, right? That particular religious leader that issues that fatwa, do you have to follow it? So not every Shiite Muslim out there is going to follow that fatwa. I just want to throw that out there. So stating that one, all right, fatwa that ends up getting issued somehow prevents everybody from doing it is crap. And then I want to quote an Iranian member of parliament. You know how he said that there was no evidence that they have been doing it? What about a direct quote from the Iranian government? Are you ready for this? When we first entered nuclear activities, our real goal was to build a bomb. No point denying it. Yes, 100%. The whole system, everyone who started this, the whole point was to build a bomb. The real goal was to build a bomb. We had started and we wanted it to go all of the way. If we could keep it a secret and test the bomb, it would be over. Just like in Pakistan, once we had begun, we had to finish it. Direct quote.
Yeah.
And we want to pretend like there's no evidence they try to do that. Not to mention the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, ends up finding uranium enriched above 80%. In Isfahan, above 80% in Isfahan, which they said was one of the centrifuges. They realigned it, and so it turned into. We have an excuse for why it ended up getting so high, right?
Yeah. And there's this concept in the Islamic world, especially the fanatical one, about lying, right? That it's okay.
Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, that's a thing as well. Yeah, it's lying in order to advance the religion, right? And then we also have we have that. Then we have 440 pounds of enriched uranium, I believe, is what was stated the last time by the IAEA in June of last year before we started bombing them. It was like 2 days before we inventoried it. And then when Steve Witkoff comes out of one of the last meetings with the Iranian foreign minister, the Iranian foreign minister then states that they have 460 kilograms. So somehow they managed to enrich an additional 20 kilograms.
After Midnight Hammer.
Correct. If we didn't blow any of their enriched uranium up, which I would really like the administration to at least come out and admit, you know what, they moved it, or our bombs were ineffective. We need to get this enriched uranium out of there. Yeah, of course they're trying to build a bomb, and we need to prevent that. But I don't think they ever will. And that's what's really angering me about this, is because when you're not telling the truth, you're giving ammunition to your enemy. And there's nothing wrong with saying we made a mistake. We thought we got it, but we didn't. Now we need to go get it.
Yeah, it's like this letter of recommendation or resignation on Kent's part. My problem with the whole thing is all of this is giving leverage to the enemy and giving them the ability to attack us with. We got a question in the live audience, and folks, Matt and I will be in the after space for about a half hour after the live TV broadcast is over, but we'll take this question here real quick. Go ahead, Joe.
We have Jeremiah, sir.
Hi, yes, thanks, and great conversation, guys. I'm going to try to be quick here. So you guys mentioned the psyops would be a run. Obviously, we can all see it. Have either one of you looked into the money flow and who's paying for it? And obviously, this is coming from both sides, GOP and the left. So have you guys looked into any of that? I have. I won't go into that, but I'm just wondering if you two have.
Of who's paying for the what? I'm sorry?
PSYOP, the information warfare.
Who's paying for all the psyops? Well, it depends on who you're looking into. It depends on which psyop campaign you want. Information warfare is being pushed by everybody. I've looked into a couple, and I mean, there's different organizations that are definitely out there floating around that are engaged in it. Some of them are state actors, some of them are non-state actors. Russia has a lot of money that's pushed in there, and when we start talking about the information warfare, and we start talking about bots that also start going into it. So we have different bot accounts, or people are calling them like sock puppet accounts or anything like that are existing. They're pushing these same narratives, and some of them have grown really, really big. So there's that portion of it. Then there's mis and disinformation that actually goes out there. So I can again point to Russia, and I could say, hey, have you ever heard of Operation SIG, SIG, like the pistol, Sig Sauer? Have you ever heard of that, sir? Go look at it. It's back from the 1970s. Yeah. And what it is it's Russia's campaign in order to kind of divide the United States away from Israel. Why would they want to do that? Right? Because they're looking at having that different influence. I believe right now, 30+% of Russia's GDP comes from the sale of oil. And so if they're able to influence the Middle East, they're able to control the Strait of Hormuz, they're able to control the Red Sea, they're able to control the flow of oil, they're able to control traffic. They're like, this stuff benefits them. Right. And so by pushing out a false narrative and causing these different things to happen and this instability, they actually benefit from it. And so is China economically.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And the Chinese, we know, are pushing money through individuals that are linked to private companies, not private, PLA. I call them PLA companies. Any company that's linked to Communist China has People's Liberation Army people that are actually running it and have control over that. And you know about Neville Singh and him pushing money. He's the guy that's the husband of the founder of Code Pink, I believe. And of course, the George Soros network. And then there's the Democrat and Republican parties through the National Endowment for Democracy and the International Republican Institute, which are the NGO arms underneath USAID. That both get over $130 million a year, that have also been orchestrating the information war on the American people. And that's why it was important to get inside USAID and break that down and to stop that type of operation. So it's coming from many different directions, the money streams are. And I'm sure if you pull enough threads, you're going to get probably back to government agencies inside the United States that aren't supposed to operate inside the United States. You can name one, the CIA, that may be involved in that. Who knows?
We can talk about money that has been given away by the USAID that goes into certain areas that we're not tracking where that money is going. That's likely funding some of these information operations as well. Right. We can talk about money that the U.S. has donated to the UN that's supposed to go to good programs, that money also gets picked up and abused by our enemies and is likely going to those information campaigns as well. Like it or not, a lot of that money that's actually being used against, like a lot of that money is being used against us. And that's why I was really, really happy to see Doge cut a lot of it off. It's troubling. It's very troubling.
And that's why Doge was gone after and Musk was gone after to stop them as quickly as they could possibly do it before they did too much damage. That's right. And I hope that gets revived at some point or is operating in the background or something, because it needs to continue to be cut off.
I mean, I'll just throw this out there. I'm just going to throw this out there for everybody. Like, our budget gets approved every single year. And it's on public record. Yeah. Our budget gets approved every single year. And people are wondering, well, where are all the weird things our government's doing? Where are all these deals funds coming from? Like, how are we doing this with all it's right in front of your face. That's, I'm telling you, we just use the same programs, USAID, cough, cough. Right. So, yeah. But I think Doge ended up taking too broad of a, and I know this for a fact because I watched one of the programs get hacked. I know Doge pissed some people off. Doge took too broad of a hack and cut some folks out that probably should have been cut out. But I mean, it's fine. It's all worked out. Yeah. It's fine now. Yeah,
it is fine, and I think we're better for it too, because they got some stuff out in the open that people were using to make money off of or do conspiracy theories off of. That the facts are much more interesting than the fake stuff, quite frankly. And it gives us the opportunity to ask for more control as voters here in the United States and ask for people be elected that will insist on more control, don't you think?
Yeah, and notice how everybody stopped complaining about it as well.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
notice how
absolutely
all
right.
of the complaints about all of the cuts went away. It's like they were able to speak up for a little bit, and then they were forced to go get real jobs. You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry you have to do that.
Yeah, exactly right. And we could cut some more because I was up at the Puzzle Palace a couple of times in the last month, and there's too many bureaucrats still working in there.
Oh man, you want to hear something scary? And I believe it's a state funded program now. I was looking into if you want to see something that'll just blow your mind, look into child sex education in states like Colorado and California. Like what we used to know about our sexual education program and what they're teaching now, it is appalling. It's absurd. Teaching things like abortion beyond 20 months, sexual promiscuity, all of these things. And this is the reason I'm bringing this up is it's part of the information campaign, right? The deterioration of America. And you start with the youth, right? And every country that's ever launched a successful information campaign has started off by targeting the youth. Yuri Bezmenov, the Naked Communists. Like, if you guys haven't looked at these things, go look at them because they are by word for word happening to this day of what's actually taking place. And we've got those cards and pieces that are set up. If there's ever a conspiracy for you to get behind, it would be that one, because at a minimum, whether or not the KGB did that doesn't matter. That is the current state of the United States of America. What we have talked about, what was written, what's on congressional record is where we're currently sitting at, and people are pretending like it's not an issue.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, man, we're almost out of time. Tell folks where they can find you and that show that's coming up before we have to sign off and go over to space. And we'll be in the space for a half hour after the show. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, you can find me over on X, over on IG at Angertab, Angertab, like Ranger with the R cut off of it, so Angertab. Or you can find me over on YouTube at Speak the Truth Actual. I'm doing live streams Monday through Friday, twice a day.
All right, Matt Tardio, guys, go follow him and subscribe to him. It's very important. You get as much trusted information sources as you can. He's one of them. We're not perfect, but you can trust us, especially if we make a mistake. We'll admit it. Tomorrow, we'll have Attorney General